Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is Spiritual Warfare. Same title that we had for our last video, except this is the second, so it's really Spiritual Warfare number 2. There's going to be a total of 3 videos. It's a little series that we're doing because what's going on in the spiritual realm and what's going on with God and Satan and good and evil and how it impacts us and those sorts of things are very important questions. And in some cases, we don't think about those things enough and we don't talk about them enough. And that makes us more vulnerable than we need to be. So that's why I'm doing this series, so that we can actually think about and talk about spiritual warfare. Now, in the video that I made yesterday, we talked about what spiritual warfare is, and we started out with a reference from the Apostle Peter as Satan as a roaring lion looking for someone to devour, and we talked about what that means. Shouldn't be understood literally. Satan isn't really a lion. He's not any kind of physical creature or being. But it means he's dangerous and he's out to get you, and you need to be aware of that. You need to be cautious. And we looked at a passage from 2 Kings chapter 6 that talks about the reality of spiritual warfare and how even though it involves things that we can't see, that doesn't mean that they're not there and that they're not real, and that very important and serious things are not happening, because they are happening. And if we understand them, then that puts us in a better position to protect ourselves and to fight the battle that's going on and that we're involved in. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to be or not, we're involved in it because it's a part of the cosmic struggle between good and evil. So we're going to continue our discussion today, and this time we're going to look at a text that is from the book of Daniel. Now, Daniel was one of the Israelites who got carried away into captivity, even though he wasn't a wicked man. Because he was an Israelite, and God just sent them all away into captivity to teach them a lesson. Daniel got sent into captivity as well. And so, while he's in captivity, he has a vision. He had been in mourning, some bad things had happened, and he tells us about that in the beginning of chapter 10. And then one day, as he's standing out looking at the river, he sees a vision. And this vision is of a man, not a physical human being, but a person who looked to be a man, but obviously was a spiritual being, something that we would call an angel. And Daniel is terrified and falls down on the ground and goes into a deep sleep and has a vision. And after the whole thing is over, then he tells us what this messenger from God, what this angel had to say to him. And we're going to look at just a few verses at the beginning of that, because it gives us some very, very important insights into this concept of spiritual warfare. So we're going to start reading in verse 10 of Daniel 10. Daniel says, "A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, 'Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you.' And when he said this to me, I stood up, trembling. Then he continued, 'Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come. Now, we're not going to go into all of the stuff that the angel then tells Daniel, because that's about Israel in captivity and Israel going to be released and the return and all this other stuff. And those are important things, but they're not what we're going to talk about in this video today. What we want to talk about is what the angel said to Daniel. He said basically, and I'm going to do some paraphrasing here, he said, I've been sent to you with a message. I'm here to deliver a message. God thinks highly of you, and you've been seeking to understand and to gain insight, and so God has a message for you. And what he's saying essentially here is he's apologizing for being late. He said, I was sent, but I got detained. I couldn't come because the prince of Persia resisted me. Now, who's he talking about? Well, there was a literal king, Cyrus, and Cyrus probably had children, so one of them was his son, who would be the prince, right? Is that who he's talking about, the prince of Persia? No, he's not talking about the physical prince, who is the son of the king, who will become the king after that king is dead. See, that's not who he's talking about. He's talking about another spiritual being, the prince of Persia, and he's talking about spiritual resistance. Things were going on behind the scenes in the spiritual realm, okay? In the last video, we read 2 Kings 6, where Elisha finds himself surrounded by the forces of the king of Aram, and he's terrified. Well, Elisha's not terrified. His servant is terrified. He doesn't see what's going on. And so Elisha prays that the Lord would open the eyes of his servant so he could see. And when the Lord does, then he looks around, and he sees all in the hill all around them, chariots, horses and chariots of fire, spiritual forces that are sent there to protect Elisha and his servant. Nothing bad's going to happen. They have all the protection they need. But you see, until the Lord opened the servant's eyes so he could see into the spiritual realm, see, that's a realm that we cannot see into, then he didn't know what was going on out there. Well, what did that tell us? Well, it tells us that in this spiritual realm that we can't see, there's all kinds of things going on. Okay, important things. The struggle, battle between good and evil. Well, that's what the messenger here, the angel here, is talking to Daniel about. He's saying the prince of Persia, a very powerful, high-ranking demon, it's not Satan himself, but it's a high-ranking demon who serves Satan, was resisting this angel. So the two angels are having a conflict, and it's so serious and so challenging that this angel cannot get away to go to Daniel to give him the message. So what happens? Michael, an archangel, the archangel Michael, one of the chief princes along with Gabriel, Michael is sent to help so that he can take over for this angel while he leaves and goes to give the message to Daniel. Right? And so he says, so here I am now. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm 21 days late, but I'm here now. Okay? Now, what do we learn from all this? Well, we learn a lot of important things. Number one, we learn that in this spiritual struggle, this struggle between good and evil, this cosmic struggle that's going on behind the scenes, where we cannot see what's going on, that some very important features exist that help us understand a little bit when we gain some insights into this. One of those things is that there is such a thing as spiritual rank. Okay? Rank, like, in the army, you have privates and you have corporals and you have sergeants and you have lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels and generals and so forth. You have soldiers of different rank. Excuse me. In the spiritual armies of good and evil, there's rank as well. And so this demon, this evil spirit, who was opposing this angel who needed to go deliver a message to Daniel, is a high-ranking person in the spiritual armies, and he's referred to as a prince. Okay, now everybody in the ancient world understood that a prince is pretty high up there. The prince is just a little ways under the king, right? Excuse me. So there is a rank that exists. There are high-ranking and lower-ranking demons, and Jesus referred to this. Excuse me. As well, in the New Testament, talks about one of the chief demons being Beelzebub. Okay, so spiritual rank exists in the forces of good and evil. Another is that there are spiritual territories. This guy was the prince of Persia. So in other words, he was in charge of things going on in Persia, and he was trying to influence the Persians for evil, to do evil things. He wanted them to accomplish Satan's will. So we know their spiritual rank, and we know their spiritual territory. And because this guy was putting up a pretty good fight against this angel who eventually came to see Daniel, we know that he was very powerful. I mean, this wasn't kid stuff. This isn't just, play stuff. This is very serious spiritual warfare. And this demon was so powerful that it took all this guy had, this angel, all that he had to struggle with him, and he couldn't afford to get away and leave someone else in charge while he went to see Daniel, until Michael, an archangel who stands in the presence of God, until Michael shows up to take over for him so that he can get away and go talk to Daniel. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that this is pretty serious stuff. It tells you that there's a lot of power here, power that we don't even understand, power of evil that takes a great deal of good to oppose it and to hold everything in check. Have you ever played a game of chess? Chess is a very interesting game. It's a game of strategy. It's very complicated. But in that game of chess, you have little pieces that are called pawns, and you move the pawn, and then your opponent will move a piece, probably a pawn. Doesn't have to be a pawn. But from that word, these little pieces that often get used first in the earlier moves of the game of chess, we have utilized that word to describe, powerful forces using less powerful forces or beings to accomplish their will and moving. And so some people think of human beings as pawns in this spiritual warfare. Well, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's true. We're not pawns being used by God or by Satan, because we're created in the image of God, and we have free will. We are self-determined beings. Satan can't make us do what he wants us to do. He can't take us like we were a pawn in a chess game and move us over here if he wants to, unless we are willing to let him do that to us. We have to submit, you see. But if we don't want to be moved over there, then he can't move us. We have free will. Not even God violates human free will, because if he did, he wouldn't have a human left when he was done, right? Because being human means being self-determined. You can't take self-determination away from a human being and still have a human being left, any more than you can take one side of a square away and still have a square left. Try that. Get yourself a pencil and paper and draw a square. Okay? And then erase one of the sides of the square. What do you have left? I don't know exactly what you'd call it, but it certainly wouldn't be a square, right? Because a square is an object with four sides of equal length. That's what a square is. If you take away one side of a square, you don't have a square anymore. Right? You get that. You understand that. Okay. Well, if being a human means a being with free will, then not even God can take away the free will and still have a human left. See? Because being self-determined is part of what it means to be a human. You take that away, you don't have human. Not even God can take away one side of a square and still have a square left when he's done. See, by definition, that's not possible. It's not possible. Even for God. Some things are not subject to power. So it doesn't matter how much power someone has. That particular thing can't be done because it's not subject to power. Okay? So we need to understand that in this spiritual warfare that's going on, where there's rank and territory and a great deal of power and things are happening behind the scenes, things that we can't see, we are not pawns in the spiritual warfare, in the struggle between good and evil. We're not pawns being used by God or Satan, because we're created in the image of God. We have free will. But Satan wants to hurt us. He will lie to us. He will tempt us. He will come to us in moments of weakness and say ugly, hurtful things. He will harass us and torment us and just make life miserable for us. If we listen to him and we let him, he could make life terrible for us. And his goal is to pull us away from God. That's what he wants to do. And he wants us to follow him. And so he tells us all kinds of lies about all the good things that we'll have if we'll follow him. And he tried the same thing with Jesus. Remember, took him up onto the mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world. He said, this is all mine. You follow me, and I'll give it all to you. Right? Do you remember that? Read about it in Matthew chapter 3, I think. Jesus said, no, I'm not going to fall down and worship you. I'm going to worship God. He's the only one I'm going to worship. See, Satan tries that same stuff with us. Go, do what I say, and you'll have such wonderful stuff. You'll have such a great life. I'll make everything wonderful for you. You'll like it. This will be good. He's just lying to you. That's what he does. He can't make you do anything, but he tempts you, and he lies to you, and he makes you feel bad about yourself, and he does anything he can do to tear you away from God. Well, don't let him do that. There's powerful forces at work, and you need to know that, and you need to be aware of what's going on. And this text in Daniel helps us understand a little bit about what's going on out there in the spiritual realm that we can't see. But in our realm, where we can see and experience, what we need to do is understand the dangers, because Satan is out to get us. And that's why Peter described him as a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. He's dangerous, and we got to pay attention. But we must also realize that we are protected by Jesus, and he can't hurt us if we stand firm in our faith, and if we tell him to go away, because we're not interested, and we're not going to listen, and we're not going to obey him. That is Satan I'm talking about. You see, we can talk to Satan just the same as he talks to us. And it's probably not Satan himself. It's probably one of his demons that he's sent to harass us and tempt us and torment us. We can talk to them, same as they talk to us. When they say, hey, you should do this, we can say, no. In fact, how did Jesus do that? He said, get behind me, Satan. Get out of the way. Go away. I'm not interested. Not going to listen to you. You should do the same thing. That's one of the ways that we protect ourselves in this struggle between good and evil. Well, in our next video, we'll look at a couple of passages in the New Testament that give us some very specific insights into the spiritual warfare that's going on and how we can protect ourselves and how we can engage in the struggle to accomplish something good. Even though Satan is trying to do evil, we can, in working with God, we can accomplish good things. So think about all these things for a while and read these texts that I've given you, Daniel 10, 2 Kings 6, and see what insights you gain from those. And in our next video, we'll talk about this some more. So in the meantime, read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.